Alright coders, this is the final upper grade challenge for the 2019 Foothill Elementary Coding Contest. This will incorporate pretty much everything that we've practiced so far. We're not going to do the pen tool and stamping, but we are going to use sprites, motion, sensing, loops, blocks, and clones. Yeah, that's the last one. Clones. I was thinking we're definitely going to use clones on this one because we're going to make a game that would be really, really difficult if you just used 100 different sprites. Okay, so here's what we want to do. We want to make a game over here where there's a balloon at the bottom of the screen, and it's just going to stay at the bottom of the screen, but the player will make it move left and right. And we're going to have sprites on the screen that are going to change what they look like to make it look like the blocks are coming down on the screen. And so the balloon, even though the balloon's sitting at the bottom, it may seem like the balloon is floating up. And the player has to navigate the balloon through the obstacles that are created from the sprites on the top of the screen. I'm going to tell you right now, this is probably the most complicated. You'll want to copy my code pretty exact to begin with, and then you can modify it on your own later on. But the way I'm going to show you is pretty specific on how to make this one work. Alright, first things first. Goodbye, cat. We don't need you. Second thing, we're going to name our file. This one is we're going to call this Balloony. If you ever watched Phineas and Ferb, Dr. Evil's Doofenshmirtz had a favorite balloon that he had. And ours is going to kind of be based on a balloon, so we're going to call this Balloony. Click on the Add a Sprite button. Pick this, the balloon sprite. You can pick whatever costume you want. I'm going to leave mine at blue. We're going to change the size on this one to 40. Okay, and let's put it down at the bottom. Let's get our balloon sprite out of the way, first of all, or our balloon code out of the way. So when the green flag is clicked, come to this event. When the green flag is clicked, we want to reset its location. So say go to, and let's do 20 and negative 150. So that'll take it right there, which is not quite centered in the screen, but you'll see why later on. Well, I'll tell you why, because the blocks we're putting on the screen are an even number, and if you centered this, it would be right in the middle of two of the blocks. We're going to add two more events here. When the left key is pressed, we want to change the x by negative 40. That 40 number is going to be really important in this game, and you'll see why later. But if I hit left, you can see that works. One of the problems, though, is that we don't want it to be off the side of the screen like this. So let's put a check in there first. So go to Control. We only want it to move left if it's not already at the far left of the screen. So come to Operators. We want to have a less than, and come to Motion and find the X location, X position. So if the X position is less than 50, then change it by negative 40. We don't want that to say negative 50. We want that to say about negative 230, because that's over here on the left side of the screen. You can see here 224, 211, 230 should line it up nicely here. So now, if I hit the left arrow, oh, see, you know what I did there? I put those in the wrong order. Let's see, negative 230 over here. I could have dragged the green code block off and brought over the right one. I was doing the wrong test. I was saying if the X position is less than negative 230, that would be, it would only move left if it's already over here. I want it to move left if it's greater than 240, and that's what this code does here. Changes it by that. That'll work. Okay, duplicate this code. We're going to change that to the right arrow now, and then switch these numbers back, make it positive numbers, and move it by positive 40. And now our code works right and left. And I know 40 is kind of a big jump. Trust me, that'll work. That'll be okay. Okay. Next thing we want to do, that's all we want to do right now. And next thing we want to do is add a new sprite. This next sprite we're going to do, though, is not one of the ones that's available, so we're going to have to draw this one. So come up to your paint tool, and we want to draw a little square that's centered in the center of our stage here. And it's very important that you get this sprite. See, here's the size. It's very important that you get that to be 40 by 40. So you're going to want to adjust that a little bit until it says 40 by 40. So I need to make mine just a little bit wider. Okay, and then do what you can to try to center that as best that you can. Okay, we don't want it to be purple at first, so switch that to white. That's not right. Use the arrow tool. Now it's highlighted. Now if I switch it to white, that one's good. Come up here, right click and duplicate this one because we want actually two sprites here. Select it. Fill this one in full of red because we want white blocks to be safe, red blocks to be dangerous. So now our sprites can be white or red. That's pretty good. Okay, next thing we want to do is let's make our map. We're going to have it so we're going to have different sprites on the screen, and we don't want that to be random though. So on the sprite, block sprite, come over here to variables. We're going to make a list. Now a list is just a bunch of variables. So we're going to call this the map list. We're going to use this to store information about how the obstacles on the screen are going to be. And we're going to start simple and make it a little bit harder. Let's put 10 things in here. So make this the length of 10 by clicking that plus sign. And let's change this to say 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1. It doesn't really matter right now. I'm just kind of trying to teach this to you how it works. Come back to our sprite, and what this map list is going to be used for is basically to tell this sprite what costume to show. If it's a 0, we want it to be white. If it's a 1, we want it to be red. The easiest way to do this is to come back to your costume and rename these. So instead of costume 1, we're going to call that 0. Instead of costume 2, we're going to call that 1. That way we can tell it. Well, I'll just show you. Come to your code here for the sprite. Come to looks. Switch costume to, if I do switch costume to 0, it's white. If I switch it to 1, it's white, it's red. But we have a list here that we can also use to reference that. So come to your variables and come over here, and you see the one here that says item 1 of map list. Don't get item number of thing. Grab this one here that says item 1 and drag it into here. So we're going to switch costume to item 1. Item 1 right now is a 0. That's why we renamed our costumes. Item 1 is 0. Costume 1 is actually called 0. And so when you switch it to the name of whatever, the value that's in this row here, well, if it's the same name of this costume here, it'll switch to that. So now we're going to switch it to item 2. And that changes it to red. Item 3, you can see item right 3 here is a 0. We're going to switch the costume of the sprite to item 3, so it'll switch it back to white. Okay, we're off to a good start here. You've got your map list set up. The next thing let's do is to get the clones to appear on the screen. This one's going to be a little bit tricky. Just trust me on this one. We need to add some things to this map list. Instead of let's make this a whole bunch of 1s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're going to do 12 because that's how many sprites we're going to fit across the screen because they're each 40 pixels wide. And let's do 12 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And let's just kind of duplicate those. So we're going to have 10 of rows in our list. 5 of them will be 1s. I'm going to do every other one here 1. And I'm going to fill the other ones full of 0s. And that's just for the sake of filling the list for the next thing we're going to do. I messed up there somewhere. Okay, so I have 1 zeros and 1 zeros and 1 zeros. And each one of these is 12 letters long. This one looks a little bit different just because the 10 pushes it over. The map list is fine. We need two variables now. So let's add one here. We need one called xloop. Xloop. And check this box for this sprite only. And then do a variable called yloop. In the sprite only. Oh, I just messed that up. Yloop. I'm going to have to delete it and then make it again. Yloop. For this sprite only. Okay. We're going to use basically two loops to take this one sprite and make in a bunch of rows and columns of sprites on the screen. So what we want to do is we're going to start with the green flag. When the green flag is clicked, we're going to come to variables. We're going to set, the first one we're going to do is here called a yloop. These are all of, basically the yloop is going to keep track of which row on the map list we're looking at. Set that to 0, come to control, we're going to do a repeat until, and we want to go through that, actually we're going to have 9 rows of sprites on the screen. So we're going to repeat that 9 times, but we can't just repeat 9 times because, I mean, you could. Yeah, we could do that. I mean, let's do that. Come back to control, repeat 9 times. Very first thing we're going to do is change the value of that yloop. So we're going to change yloop by 1. So it started at 0, it's going to go to 1. Each time it runs through here, it's going to go to 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. Basically, now that'll loop through the 9 rows of sprites on the screen, but in each row we need to have 12 sprites to go across the side. So let's set our xloop variable to 0. That needs to happen for each row. And then we need to do another loop inside. So we're going to do here a control repeat 12. Now this 9 and the 12 are specifically because our sprite is 40 pixels by 40 pixels. If you did 40 pixel sprite across the bottom and 40 pixels up and down, you can do 9 by 12. And then inside here, come back to variables. We need to change our xloop by 1 inside of the loop. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is go to control and create clone of myself, and I'll just show you that right now. Hit the green flag. We just created 12 times 9, so 108 clones of this sprite. Now they're all on top of each other. That's not super helpful. So let's put them in a better spot. Here we're going to use some math. It's a little complicated, but just put in what I'm putting in here. If you did a different one with different size sprites, you're going to have to fiddle with this math and do it yourself. Basically, they're going to appear on the screen on multiples of 40 because they're 40 wide and we don't want them to overlap. But, well, okay, so let's do this. I'll show you what we're doing here. If you put in here, go to variables, xloop into your x's and yloop into your y's, and if you just run this times 1 times 1, they'll spread out, but they'll be all on top of each other. Let's turn off the map list for a second, and so you don't have to watch those. When I run this, because x and y is specific to each sprite, when you create a clone, each one of those is going to be set with a different x and y, because it only determines that value before it creates the clone. So once that clone is created, it's not going to be able to, each one will be different. So hit the green flag now, and you see how it's making 9 rows of 12, but they're all on top of each other still. If you did that and you multiplied by 40, they'll start to spread out better. Doop, 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 doop. But what we need to happen is for this to start down here in the bottom corner instead of in the middle of the screen. So what we're going to do here is we're going to offset the starting location. by subtracting. Now the best way to do this is to come to operators and drag over the subtract button, put the variable in the beginning, and for this one, because there's 12 and we have 6 here, we want actually 6 to be over on the left more. We're going to subtract by 6 because I need 6 of them to the left side of the center. And for the y value, we're actually going to subtract by 4.5. Just see what happens there. Okay, now our sprites are lining up a little bit better. I don't like how this is not in the center corner. There's different ways to do that. I want to fiddle with the center of the actual sprite here. And we're going to redo one of these real quick. But to make sure they're lined up perfectly, highlight this one. And let's see what happens if I put it there. Oh, see, that made it worse, right? I think what we want to do instead is to drag it so the center of the costume is at the top right of the square. Now when you run your program, because the center of the sprite is actually the top right of the square, it lines up nicely with the corner there. But let's get rid of this red one because we need a red and a white one. You can try to line these up perfectly, but it's not very precise, and so if you just try to eyeball it, and I switch this one's, I can't really switch that. If I switch this one's costume, they may not line up perfectly. I'm just saying, they may not line up perfectly. Delete this one, duplicate this one again, highlight it, fill it full of red, rename it to be costume number 1, and now the sprites should be perfectly congruent, the exact same. So come to code, run it. You notice this one's red. If I stop the program and I switch this one's costume to white and then run it again, now they'll all be white. Because our program doesn't tell the blocks here what costume they should be showing. So let's add that to our code next. That's under looks. Switch costume to, bring that over here before you create the clone. What do we want to switch it to? Okay, let's bring back up our variables and our map list. Let's start at the top here. This is item number 1 of the map list. And so I'll just show you this one. If you take this and say y loop and put this y loop variable into, oh no, I'm skipping ahead, sorry, right here. If I say switch costume to item 3 of map list, these will all be white. If I switch it to item 2 of map list, then they'll all be red. What I want to do is be able to, when it's creating these clones, to look at the map list and only set it to what it should be here. So if I change this to y loop is the one that starts at 0 and it starts at 1, and it's going to go through 12 of these. So when y loop is 1, it should set all of the costumes to this one. But when y loop is 2, it'll set all of the costumes to this one. Now this might not actually work, and I'll show you why here in a second. It did work. Okay. Well, I didn't expect that to work because actually costume 2 is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I don't have a costume named 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Somehow Scratch figured out what I wanted to do. But we got our rows to appear. That's a good start. But what if I had, instead of just all 1s and 0s, I actually wanted to do, let's see, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. If I run that, it's made them all zeros again. I think it just takes the first number there. Well, how do we go 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1 to make it white, red, white, red, white, red? We have to look at this bit of code right here. Instead of item y loop of map list, come to operators. Item of loop y of map list is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. We need to grab this one here that says letter 1 of apple instead of letter 1 of apple, because we've practiced that. We know what letter 1 of apple is A, and letter 5 of apple is E, because it's a 5-letter word. Put item while loop of map list in there. Letter 1 of that is going to be 1. Letter 2 of that will be 1. We messed with item number 2, so let's look at item number 2. Letter 2 is 1. Letter 1 is 0. Letter 3, here's map item number 2. Letter 3 should be 0. That's 0. Okay. We need our program to go through all 12 of these rows, or 10 rows, and do all 12 of the letters in the row. We already have our variables for that, and that's why we're changing x loop by 1. It determines the x location on the screen, but it also refers to the numbers here in the map list. Come to variables, drag over x loop into this spot right here. This will switch the costume as it goes through this loop as y loop gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it starts, and then x loop gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The costume will be set to the letter of the word that's in the correct row. Okay, let's run this and you'll see what I mean. See the 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1? The X loop goes through here, looks at the first letter, then the second letter, then the third letter, then the fourth letter, then the fifth letter. And depending on what the X is, it sets the costume to that value. Okay? Let's say I wanted to do, let's change our whole map up here for a second. I'm going to do that as every other row. And on the other rows, I'm going to do 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. And just copy. I'm going to paste that over here. You should be able to see a little pattern in the map list, but it's kind of hard to look at. It goes 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. This one goes 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. I'm going to turn off the visibility of map list, run it again. You should see the pattern there. Oh, you know what's going on here? Is the sprites are still on top of each other, I think. So they're getting overridden, I think. I'll go back and look at our map list. Oh no, I didn't finish it. That's what happened. Okay, copy here, paste there, copy here, paste there. Now our checkerboard should look right. Okay, did you notice how slow that was? Because every time it makes a clone, it refreshes the screen. Let's fix that problem right now. You should remember from the musical instrument one where we use blocks, we're going to do that right here. So come to My Blocks, create a block here that says clone, let's call it Make Clones. Okay? And just hit OK. We'll come back to this here in a second. We're going to define Make Clones. We're going to drag these over here, and then when the green flag is clicked, we're going to do Make Clones. Now, you would expect this to be exactly the same when we hit the green flag. Was that any faster? No, of course not, because it's the exact same code. But right-click on Make Clones, come to Edit, and Run without screen refresh. Now, because we're not doing any sound, this should work pretty well. We're going to run this, and it's going to do all of this without ever updating the screen. So now watch how quickly that goes. Blink, stop, go, stop, go. It runs this whole little function here, this little subroutine, without ever coming back and refreshing the screen. Okay, that is the start of our program. The next thing we want to do is change the behavior of those sprites. Okay, here's what we want to do. This sprite 1 here, we don't want that one visible. So let's do looks, and when the green flag is clicked, we want to hide that. Now, of course, that hides them all. The reason we want to hide that is because, let's turn the visibility back on. You notice how I click the green flag and then I do the stop sign? This thing stays visible. I don't necessarily want that to be sitting there when the program's not running. So let's make that disappear when the green flag is clicked. Of course, now they're all stayed invisible. Let's come to an event here, and when I start as a, oh no, it's under control. Sorry. When I start as a clone, then let's come to looks and do show. So our original one here is still going to be invisible because it was never told anything but hide. But these ones, they will reveal themselves when they start as a clone. Okay. All right. Let's make it so the blocks look like they start falling. Okay. There's different ways to do that. You could actually have these clones start moving on the screen. I could show you that real quick, actually. Let's do a control loop. Forever. Events. No, that's control again. Control. Let's do wait a half a second. And then motion. Let's change Y by 10. So every half a second, these are going to move down the screen. No, they're not. Well, let's put that down here. When I start as a clone, let's put it in the forever loop. Oh, they're moving up the screen. Okay, this is one way to do it. We're not going to do it this way. We're not going to do it this way. I don't like this way. I feel like that is a mess. Here's what we are going to do. Let's put that up here. And instead of that being built into a forever loop, let's use a broadcast for that. So when I receive, we're going to call this update. When I receive update, then what we want it to happen is to change the costume. We don't want it, well, I mean, we could do it this way. We could do it this way. We could do event, control, not event. We could do broadcast here, broadcast, update. And this would accomplish the same thing. So our main sprite, once it's made the clones, every 0.5 seconds it's going to broadcast update. Every single one of these clones, when it receives update, it's going to change the Y by 10. That is one way to do it. I don't like that method for this type of game though, because all of your sprites now are at the top of the screen. And that would be useful if I had like 1,000 sprites and I wanted to just have them move and move and move and move. We're going to use the same sprites though, and what I want to do for this program is just change their appearance. Come to looks, and we're going to copy this code right here. Switch costume, letter X, and then get rid of that create clone again. And what we need to do though is we need it to change as the game is playing. So come to control, nope, don't do that. Come to variables, make a new variable. We're going to call this offset Y, and it's for all the sprites. It's going to be the same for everybody, offset Y. Basically, what we're going to do is while the game is running, instead of the sprites actually moving, we're going to have remember our list here, the map list, instead of the bottom row of sprites looking at row 1, well, after a second, I want them to look at row 2. And then after next second, they're going to change to be the value of row 3. You'll see what I mean. Trust me on this one. But we created a variable here called offset Y. When the game starts, we want to set that to 0. And then let's change that offset Y every second. Change that to 1 second. Change it by 1. Okay, so what that'll do is it'll change. Oh, it won't do anything right now. That won't do anything. If we stop this and run it, that looks exactly the same. Okay. Instead of changing Y by 10 though, what I want to happen here is put in here a plus And instead of looking at the while loop, we're going to change that so it looks at the while loop plus offset y. Okay, so when every second it changes the offset by 1, broadcast update, every clone has this code here that says switch costume to, instead of letter X loop of item Y loop of map list, we're going to increase the offset by 1 every second. And turn off the map list, run the green flag. Alright, you see what's happening? Well, you should probably be a little bit confused of why there's a bunch of gibberish on the top of the screen. Well, that's because our map list is not very long. If we make the map list longer, and I add a bunch more of these, and I put this code in here, you'll see the difference. These ones I'm going to actually make, let's make these a little bit different, okay? Instead of 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0, let's do a solid wall on row 11. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 of ones, and then let's do 1 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. Let's do, I like this one. Let's make a few rows that look like that. Okay, now let's run it. There should be a solid wall, and I put too many in there. Let's pull up our map list again. I thought that was too long. I have too many zeros here. So I'm just copying and pasting with a smaller value. Now after it goes through the first 10, does a solid wall, and then you're seeing these values, 1 0 0 0 0 1, and the program will keep running even though these sprites aren't changing anymore. That's okay. Let's change it so our last one is just straight zeros though. That'll make it so you can tell when the map is actually at its end. It's running every second. It's changing the offset, so instead of doing row 1, he's doing row 2. And now, when it gets to the end, it switches straight to white. Okay? If you wanted to make that go faster, instead of changing every 1 second, you can change that to 0.5 seconds. Okay, let's deal with this map list. Do you see how annoying that was to modify the components of that, to modify the values in there? I don't like making this thing appear, making it disappear, making it appear, making it disappear. Let's create the map list programmatically. Okay, so the code is actually going to create that for us. Let's add another event. No, let's add another block here. We're going to call this make map. We're going to run it without screen refresh, hit OK, and let's drag this, nope, let's define it. Let's create the map list, the make map code first. Okay, so when we make map, what we want to do is, this variable here called map list, let's get rid of that. We're going to delete all of map list, and then let's add things to it. So let's do, for example, control here, repeat 10 times, and come back to variables, add thing to map list. So let's add 1 1, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and then 1 1, and then we run it. Now, did that work? Well, it didn't really work because what I think is happening is it's making the clones before it makes the map list. Well, and think about it. Where did we run this code? Which part of our program ran this make map code? Didn't run that anywhere. So come to my blocks. Let's make the map, and then let's make the clones. Blink. Okay, now the program is still running. You can't tell. Let's come back to variables and add this. Let's have some straight lines here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I may have counted wrong there. But that should add a solid line in the end here. And if you pull up the map list now, you have 10 rows of 1s and 0s and 1 row of this. I still think that's too long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. If you repeated this 5 times, then that solid line will appear much later. Now, the program doesn't know what to do when it's trying to do more sprites than you actually have rows in your map list. So I'm actually going to duplicate this, and I want our very last one to be 12 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't know what happened there. Okay. See that? When we run it, deletes it. Okay. Now we can get real, and I think I want this to always be at the end of the map. So we're going to add some things in here, but I still want this to be at the end. Let's do 5 patterns of a different pattern. And maybe let's do 3 of these. And maybe we want a couple of blocks in the middle of the screen. So I deleted the zeros, I changed them to 1s, duplicate that again, and maybe we're going to change those. And let's duplicate this. I know I'm going really fast. I apologize for that. You can pause the video and see what I'm doing. But basically, I've got 5 rows with just red on the sides, and then 3 rows with 2 in the middle, and then 3 rows with 4 in the middle, and then 3 rows with 2 in the middle. Let's see what happens. Turn off our map list. Pretty cool, huh? That's an easy way to change the map without having to change a lot of it. Okay, you know what, I had an idea. Let's do, no, let's not do that. Let's do it this way. We're going to do a control, and let's say before I do that, this is what I want to duplicate. Maybe I want the space where the balloon can be in to be a little bit wider. So I'm going to change the double ones on the sides to just a 1 and a 0. Now there is still a little bit of work to this, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's your game. I think I have too many zeros. Yeah, on this second one where I repeated 10, I have too many zeros there. So let's get rid of that, and let's just have 5 of those instead of 10. Still too many zeros. You have to fiddle with it. Do it the way you want. That's not the way I want it. Maybe not enough. Something like, yeah, that's what I wanted. It goes from 2 on the side to 1 on the side, and then it has blocks in the middle. We want the player to have to navigate the balloon through the map. So let's fiddle with the balloon code for a second. But the easiest way I found to do this is to, once the green flag is clicked, to do a forever loop. And this may not be the best way, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to come up here and go to the front layer. So every time the balloon is, this script is running, the balloon's moving to the front. So that should make it on top of those sprites. I can move it around. And we need to do a test here for if it touches the red, it needs to pop. That's easy. We can put that inside the forever loop too. So do events, do control. If, do you remember how we would check to see if it's touching red? It's under sensing. If touching color, let's come to our sprite costume, switch that to red real quick, and then come back to the balloon. If touching color, because you want to be able to use the eyedropper, take a sample of, oh, that's not going to work. Let's make it visible. There it is. Come back to the balloon, touching color. We want that red right there. And you can't do that when the program's running. That's why I had to fiddle around with making that visible again real quick. Turn that off. Okay, if the balloon touches red, control, stop all. So the game will end if the balloon touches red. I think we made the balloon not visible. Don't do that. Make sure your balloon's visible. Okay, if the balloon's touching red, see how the game ends? The balloon's touching red, the game ends. This is one way to do it. It looks like the balloon's going up, even though the sprites are just going down. Of course, the game's can end right there. Okay, I would like to change part of our background for a second. So come to this sprite here. Come to costume. I find these black lines here to be distracting. So for the outline, let's make this outline, so with the brightness, let's make that one white and save it and come to the red. And let's make this outline red. Now you can predict what that will do. The white will just be white and the red will just be red. When you come to code, or when you run that now, the borders are basically gone. Now you can fiddle around with yours, but the black lines are gone. Okay, boys and girls, we're about done with the program. The only thing that's really left to do is to make your map bigger and longer. Okay, you can do that just by repeating the code you already have, and then changing it a little bit. Maybe I'm going to put some more ones in here, and maybe some. Oh, you know what would be fun? Would be to make it have a really skinny space the player has to get through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then let's line this up. 1, 2, 4, 1. I'm going to put these back on here. Oop, not there. Here. Now we run it again. What I did with the 1s and 0s there, oops, gotta avoid that, is coming up here there will be a gap that gets smaller, and then it gets really small. Alright. I don't like that I have to move this off and move it back on. So where we have the make map code, I'm actually going to bring this up here and put that here. So the ending will always be 1s and then 0s. But yeah, I paused the video and changed something. You want to make sure you reattach that one like I did. But you're basically done with the program. You could change this up a little bit though. If in your costumes you drew some squares that were different colors, you could have the program sense and have different things happen if it touches a different color. For example, instead of waiting 0.5, you could set a variable here called speed. And when the balloon touches a green one, the speed goes faster. If it touches a yellow one, it slows down. You could have a costume. It wouldn't even have to be a color. It could be a different sprite, actually, like a bird or something that could pop the balloon. There's different ways you can do that. I want to show you real quick and a more detailed example of what you can do with this. This is a Scratch program I made called Space Ace. And I have here a list. And in my list here I have a bunch of different, 99 rows here of different letters and numbers. My costume for this one has 23, 24 different costumes here. And when you run the code, as you're walking around, you can make a pretty detailed world. This is the inside of a spaceship. And you can explore around here. And by changing the costumes and the values of your map list, you can make very detailed game worlds. And so I challenge that to you, and hope you enjoyed this one. I know it was long, but I think if you're able to understand everything that we did in that program, you are well on your way of being an expert coder. Way to go.